All set. Good evening, everyone. The Red Bank Planning Board will come to order this 9th day of July, 2025. The time is 7:07 p.m. Notice this meeting is being held in accordance with the Public Laws of 1975, Chapter 231. An adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by notice sent to the Asbury Park Press and 2 River Times, as well as being posted in the main lobby here and the website. Roll call, please.
Mayor Portman, absent. Greg Fitzgerald, absent. Christina Blumentakis, here. Dan Mancuso,
Here.
Lou Demento, absent. Barbara Boyce, here. Megan Massey, absent. Wilson Beebe,
Here.
Itzel Hernandez, here. Frederick Stone, absent. And Brian Parnigan.
Here. We'll do the minutes at the end, just remind me.
Okay.
Great, we have one public hearing tonight, one Riverview Plaza, Block 9, Lot 3301. Riverview Medical Center in the MS zone, preliminary and final site plan approval. Bulk variance applicant needs amended preliminary and final site plan approval along with bulk variances to permit renovations to the emergency care center, improve vehicular and pedestrian circulation, restriping of the parking lot, and upgrade the critical backup power system with an addition of a generator. Good evening, gentlemen.
Chairman John Junko, Giordano Helen, C-Sloop attorney on behalf of the applicant. And the applicant did provide service in accordance with the municipal land use law.
Yes, and Mr. Junko, I did review the service. Everything appears to be in order. The only issue I'll point out to you is that the issue of the waiver that you're seeking for the easement is not mentioned within the notice. There seems to be a reference within your engineer's letter that you're going to be seeking a waiver from the Borough Council, but the ordinance does not. I reread the ordinance after you and I had a conversation this morning, but today I had not read the ordinance itself. After reading the ordinance itself, it does not say anything about being able to seek a waiver from the Borough Council. What it says is from the municipal agency, which is the board.
Well, if you definition in the municipal agency, it is not just the board. In fact, I have it.
And let me say, while you're looking that up, I'm fine with you proceeding. I just want you to be aware of the fact that it's not in the notice, and I'll leave that to you. It's a waiver either way, so I don't think you're in trouble for not noticing for a waiver.
Also, the definition of municipal agency means a municipal planning board or board of adjustment or a governing body of a municipality when acting as a minor subdivision, provided that such subdivision is not involved with plan. No, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong. When acting pursuant to this act, any agency created by or responsible to one or more municipalities when such agency is acting pursuant to this act.
Yeah, I read that as saying if they haven't, I mean, to me, I still think this is the municipal agency in this particular case. So I believe that this is the municipal agency that would have to give you the waiver. Because I don't see how practically you could go before, you could come here and say, defer the waiver to the council. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know how you would possibly even procedurally do that. So I think you have to seek the waiver from this board. I don't think you can seek it from the council. That's my position. I don't, because again, unless you can tell me procedurally how you would possibly do what you're suggesting, I don't think it's possible.
I'm just reading the definition of municipal.
I understand that, but
the ordinance had to rely on because there's no independent definition. If that's your rule,
I don't see how we have a choice. I mean, listen, you always have the option of obviously the easement would be to the borough, and the borough theoretically could reject the easement, but that would be different than seeking the waiver.
During the hearing, we will demonstrate what is involved in the easement, but it does involve the hospital buildings, parking, and driveways that are on hospital property, and a portion of it towards the easterly side where the bulkhead is substantially remote from the property line. So
all right, we'll get to that. I only wanted to tell you because you asked me if I reviewed the service. I wouldn't even brought it up just now if you hadn't asked me that question. So yes, so I find the service is in order, and I'm just going to mark the following exhibits into evidence. Exhibit A1 is going to be the preliminary and final major site plan. Exhibit A2, boundary and partial topographic survey. A3 is the canopy plans. A4 is the flood hazard area verification. And for those playing at home, I'm just going down the engineer's letter, so you don't actually have to write it all down. A5 is the stormwater management report. A6 is the NJDEP CAFRA environmental impact statement. A7 is the geotechnical report. A8 is the Riverview Medical Center emergency services drop-off diagram. A9 is the generator specifications letter. So those are the 9 exhibits. I'm not marking in numbers 10, 11, or 12 because those are just letters to the board. And then as exhibit B1, as in board 1, will be the T&M review letter of July 3rd, 2025. Okay.
Chairman, I have 2 witnesses, or potentially 2 witnesses. First is Mario Ionel, our project engineer. He's a licensed professional engineer. I'll ask that he be sworn. I also have Brian Tracy, the architect that designed the canopy. If the board has questions about the canopy, certainly be willing to present him. And we can do that anyway, but I'm not sure the board wants to investigate the issues of the structure of the canopy expansion, but we can do that.
And let me just swear, I'll swear on Jackie too while I'm doing this. Do you swear any testimony that you're going to give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you very much. And I'll just swear you in, sir. Do you swear any testimony that you're going to give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes,
And just state your name for the record.
my name is Mario Ionelli.
And you are a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey, and your license is in good standing.
That's correct.
Thank you. Nothing, I don't need anything further, Mr. Chairman.
Brian Tracy.
We'll get to Mr. Tracy when we get to Mr. Tracy.
I think that you outlined our application. I'm certainly going to repeat it, but
Excuse me. Would you please use the microphone?
The mics don't work.
You're not working at all?
Oh, there it is. Oh, never mind. They fixed
Oh,
it.
maybe
Hey.
you just needed an engineer to do it. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You can go ahead and give us a quick rundown.
You outlined the application as we submitted it. So I would like to simply start with Mr. Ionelli, ask him to present the engineering study and report of the proposed design and then his testimony with regard to supporting the grant of the variances.
Okay.
So before I start, I'd like to, well, Mario first, let's get the credentials first.
Oh, we don't need the credentials. He's a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey. That's good enough for us.
Sorry about that. So I do have an aerial that was not submitted. I'd like to mark it as an exhibit.
Sure.
Are you others under your direction?
Yes,
It'll be exhibit A10 and it is an aerial. Is there a date on it?
yes, today's date, 7/8/2025.
Okay.
It's titled overall boundary / aerial exhibit.
Oh, I'm sorry, overall.
Overall boundary / aerial exhibit.
Thank you.
Yes, okay.
Mario, you've been accepted as an expert. Describe, the board is familiar with the hospital, particularly the area we're seeking to address this application.
Yeah, I'm gonna be referring to 810. Can everybody see the board okay? Okay, so the property is known as Block 9, Lot 3301, which is the main campus. And Lot 11, 1.02, which is the medical office of the Booker Building. The total area of the site is roughly 7.7 acres, 7.8 acres. It's zoned MS, medical service zone. It's partially in the CAFRA regional center. And ironically, one of the site is in the metropolitan planning area front, the rear of the site, it's actually within the environmental center. Planning area top. The site runs on the East Front Street. As you're familiar with it, this is the former Washington Street right of way, which was vacated. And this is Front Street. I'm highlighting again on exhibit A10. The entrance to the site is from the former Washington right of way. There's what I'll refer to as a loop road, a one-way going from North is up on the plan, so going east, right to left, around the loop road, ends up at a stop sign at Union Street. The ambulance for the site currently, and will continue to enter this, there's like a canopy area off of Union Street. The parking garage on the east side right here, there's an entrance off Union Street and an exit on Wharf. Is it Wharf? It was
Wharf.
Wharf. The overall parking, the existing site has 1,076 parking stalls, where 1,296 are required. The on-site is mainly, or the surface lots are mainly valet, predominantly a valet service, which is free, provided for by the hospital. As you enter this loop road, which I'm highlighting again, there's two canopies. The first canopy is usually people arriving, and the second canopy is usually leaving, but both of those are a valet operation. Most of the parking lot in the front, which will be a subject of discussion later, which will be called parking lot B, is valet. And that's important to understand for later when we start talking about some of our mitigation for the parking that we lost to accommodate the proposed improvements. So I'm gonna flip over to, this was submitted, so I'll just refer to it by sheet. Is that okay?
Mhm.
This is sheet C-103.
Of which this is your site plan, so this is exhibit A1.
Okay, is A1? I'm gonna mark it.
No, you don't have to mark it because we marked it, but it's A1. Just tell us what sheet of A1.
C-103 of A1.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't know if the board's able to see, this is a overall existing conditions, because existing constraints and overall site plan. I'm highlighting East Front Street. And basically, and this is, when we look at the rear of the site, you have the river on the north. And what we're proposing there's three aspects of the project that we're proposing. In the northeast corner of the site, just west of the existing oxygen tank, behind the building is a proposed generator. There's also the emergency department, which is located right on the south, I would call it the westerly corner of the building, near where the loop road ties back into Union. There's gonna be a new entrance to the ED. So to make it a little clearer. So we're gonna focus first on the generator. This is of A1 sheet 105. So again, located in the rear of the site behind the building, the proposed generator is going to be located just to this top of the page. On the left-hand side of this page is the western side of the loop road where we're going to be constructing the canopy. So actually, I like to touch on the canopy. So currently, this loop road that goes around it varies from roughly 30 feet down to about 24 feet. And in front of the area that we're proposing the canopy, again, I think I wish I could put up two easels that would
Mario, that very. In front of the current emergency room in the future, and will be an emergency room, but also close to Union Street.
That's correct. So now I'm highlighting it back on this area, which is.
I did not hear that comment. I could not hear your comment.
Ask Mario to confirm that portion that he's speaking about now is in front of the emergency room near Union Street. So in the exhibit that he just showed you, on the right-hand side was from the area where the generator is proposed, which is on the eastern side of the hospital campus. What he's talking about now is the area around the emergency room on the eastern side of the campus. But it was two sides on one sheet.
Got it.
Yes.
I can get it side by side, it might be easier. It'll just be easier, you can see with the aerial, it's more recognizable. Yes. So. That'll work. If you can see both now, I can refer to it. So what I put on these on the right is an A1 is C105. So now I think it's easier to describe it. On A10, I'm highlighting right the point that we were just talking about where the existing ED is. You can see there's 3 parking spaces there, and it's on the western tail of that loop road. This is a blow up of that area. Again, that's C105 of A1. You can see what we're proposing is to create a new entrance into the ED on this eastern wall. And basically what we're gonna do is gonna take that, the current lane there is roughly 24 feet. It's a 12-foot lane and roughly a 15-foot parking space. And we're gonna convert that into a 20-foot wide drop off. That's gonna have a 12-foot lane and an 8-foot border striped area. And it's gonna have a through lane that's gonna have a 12-foot lane and an 8-foot gore. Now, I'll show that to you on C105, is that basically gonna come around the loop, and then you're gonna pull off to the right, very similar to the other canopies and other drop-offs. And you're gonna come off and you're gonna have a 20-foot wide drop-off lane that allows for bypass. So like if somebody comes in and they stop in front of the canopy, you know, we wanted to make sure we had enough room that somebody can get around it. That holds true for the through lane that we created. Through lane is roughly 20 feet wide. So making it 20 feet wide with a 12-foot lane, we have the ability to bypass. When we do these improvements, unfortunately, we lose 8 parking stalls. To create this wide, we basically have almost 40 feet wide of pavement. So to create that benefit to the circulation, we had no choice but to lose 8 parking stalls. We're also proposing some improvements within the Union Street right of way, which is simply a new crosswalk, new handicap ramps, and a stop sign, the stop bar. That's basically just reconfiguring intersection that's currently there. If I highlight again A10, you can see that the stop bar and the crosswalk is there. We're just simply reconfiguring it to allow for a little more control and to accommodate the drop off.
Barry, you're not proposing any physical change to that area other than striping.
No, there's new curbing going in. There's new curb ramps going in that'll be compliant with current ADA requirements, new crosswalk, and some landscaping actually too. Because if you look in front of the ED here, there's a very large 12-foot sidewalk, 15-foot sidewalk that we're gonna put landscaping in, and the hospital's agreed to maintain that landscape. Just to soften the front. And also, one of the things that you're gonna hear, when we did this overall site, we decreased impervious coverage by roughly 30 square feet. That was because of the CAFRA has a limit on how much impervious coverage we can have. We're over by the municipality's requirement. And from a stormwater perspective, the DEP wanted us to match the existing. So this literally was an accounting exercise of every time I added a square feet, I had to find the square feet to remove it or it wasn't gonna work.
So we just so you know, it might help you that we put exhibit A8, A8 up on the screen, which may help you even better.
Yes, so
Describing what's going on.
yeah. My voice should carry well enough.
It will.
See if that mic works.
Well,
Lynn.
it doesn't work, but it's,
No.
His voice carries.
I can't see it.
you want me to, yeah, you could twist it. You
I
could,
ain't touching.
Fix the microphone.
My luck.
better.
Mario, so are you moving the
Yeah, that's good.
ambulance approach to the ER to former Washington Street to then come across the front of the hospital to the new drive up?
This is the current ambulance entrance.
Yeah.
We're not touching that.
You're not touching that.
Here,
This
ambulance access will remain as is today.
completely.
And the new drive up you're talking about now is for what?
Wait, when they come around here, the new canopy is going right on the,
Is that for the public?
for patient drop off.
Okay, gotcha.
So that patient drop off will go here and we had to reconfigure this intersection, which is not really shown completely here, but to make that intersection, because you got the bypass lane and the drop-off lane's got to come together and then they have to stop.
And then you have the entrance to the parking lot is right there as well.
So we're not touching that. We're just touching the crosswalk. We're touching the fact that we have to control the traffic coming out of the two lanes and come to a good stop and have a safe crosswalk. So, the canopy at the, I might use that pretty picture again. The canopy that you see here is roughly, it's a little under 18 feet, 17 feet, 8 inches off for clearance, which is more than enough clearance. And
You're trying to use the canopy to provide a protection from folks getting into the emergency room.
well, ideally, what you want to get, it's got to be on the right side so the passenger can be dropped off. So somebody comes up or they're picking up out, at least for protection of the weather. So that's the goal, is so people are going in and out of the ED. They can either be, they can be dropped off or picked up, under cover and go right into the emergency department. So when we, also lost, some landscape trees, roughly 8 trees to be removed, 6 qualify for replacement. But we're proposing as part of the canopy, 6 new shade trees, 10 ornamental trees, 78 shrubs, and like 67 grasses. Now, there was a comment in the letter that if the Environmental Commission has any comments on the types or species, we'll be more than willing to listen. I can tell you the DEP was very careful on what species we would use. They wanted non-invasive, but we'd be more than happy if it fits the criteria the DEP provided us. We'd be more than happy to work with them on anything they want to add to this. So that is the gist of the canopy. And then moving on to the generator. Again, the generator is located, I'm highlighting A10. You see the location on that striped area on A10 right here? That's the existing O2 tank. So basically, to get to that location, you have to drive down the old Washington Street, go under what is referred to as the bridge, which is the building that goes over. You have to wrap around and go around to get to this parking lot. Now, again, like the parking lot in front, that parking lot is all valet. There is no public parking in that area. The generator is basically going to be 2 generators, 2,000 kilowatt, that are going to replace the existing 6 generators that are outdated and really beyond their usable life. The new generators are an enclosure that's weatherproof and it's a walk-in, so it looks like basically a closed structure. They sit on 2 diesel belly tanks. That's like actually what the generator sits on. Natural gas is not considered, they have to have the belly tank to meet the requirements, and it has to have a certain size for a certain runtime. These tanks have spill containment and also leak detection, so they are very environmentally conscious. The dimensions of this generator is roughly 47 feet by 26 feet wide by about 25 feet tall. The generator, the nature of the generator is that it's going to provide backup for critical services such as the ED expansion, patient rooms. If you've ever been in a patient room, you see a red plug. That red plug is usually generator backup for, so each patient room can have power if something goes wrong. It allows the hospital to continue its critical care when there's a power outage. Also, in talking to the team, it is an ongoing renovation of the ED. When I say ED, it's emergency department. I'm sorry about that. Engineers are really bad that way. The emergency department expansion, the current 6 generators collectively can't handle when this thing is when it opens up. So this generator is actually needed to be, to have that redundancy and backup at long term. Now the generator does not result in any trees being taken down. We're just working in this area again, referring to A2. If you're familiar with the site, there's like a stabilized engineered slope. That's really all we're working. We do lose 2 spaces for the generator right next to the O2 tank. And one of the things that we had to do, and I'm talking about the accounting that the DEP made me go through. referring to C-103. As you're going down Washington Street, we had to create a landscaped area to lose parking to offset the impervious for the generator. So again, this was literally like a ledger. I have a plus and minus side that we had to balance at the end of the day.
So you're replacing landscaping and you're relocating.
At the end of the day, without including the landscaping that's in the right of way, just what's on site, we're reducing impervious roughly by 30 square feet. We literally just by, if you look at the whole thing, it's about 100 square feet. We didn't take credit for what's going on in the right of way because we don't own it, but we're just putting landscaping. And as part of this, like we had to lose 8 spaces, 2 for the generator, 6 for that offset. So now we're starting, no, 6 for the offset, or the offset by the generator. So right now, we're starting to mount up spaces. We're starting to lose, spaces between the 2 of them. I'll get into that in a minute, that we have to figure out how to compensate for that. We'll get to that in a minute. As part of the generator, I'm referring to C-105, there is a slope that we're cutting into. So we need to construct a retaining wall, right? And the retaining wall, which when I say retaining wall, that means retaining, right? That's a little different than what I'm about to say next. That retaining wall along the southern side of the generator basically is going to retain earth roughly 16 feet plus or minus, right? As you work north and you start going, that wall starts going in between the O2 tank, which is on the east side, and the generator, which will be on the west. That becomes basically a fire separation wall. Because in working with the mechanical engineers and the team, NFPA requires, for the most part, to put it simply, is that you have to interrupt the line of sight from the O2 tank to the generator. So that wall, once that wall wraps around, again, referring to C-105, this is the retaining wall aspect of it. As it turns north, it'll still be retaining, and at some point, it's just going to be just a standalone wall. And that wall is going to stand up roughly 26 feet, right? And there's a benefit to that, you'll hear later, because it actually helps, even though the generator is extremely quiet, it actually helps with sound. But that is required by code because it's got to have a fire separation between the O2 tank and the generator. In essence, line of sight. So that 26 feet roughly is from the generator side, so one cannot see the other. There was a comment that retaining wall calculations would be provided. Once the final design is done, we will absolutely provide it to the engineer. That was requested, and also for the there was questions when we first started, is that we look at other locations. Have we looked at other locations for this generator? Yes. When you look at the overall constraints map, which I'm showing right now, I'm highlighting on C-103. This is the flood elevation of elevation 11. That the DEP basically, that's the current flood elevation. I know we're talking about what could be coming and what you don't know when it's coming. Right now it's 11. Under the proposed rules, it's going to be roughly 16. The slab of the generator is roughly 16. So this generator not only is out of the floodplain as it currently stands, but the slab itself is basically at the elevation, which is fine because we've actually put these in floodplains where the belly tank acts as a prop because it actually keeps it up and elevated. We were not going to spend all this money and time as an organization and as consultants to have this generator in the floodplain. The goal was to, if there's ever an emergency, we want to be able to run this thing and have it available. So when you look at the fact that the backside here is all in the floodplain, really, where else were we going to put it? I mean, you're talking about parking is a premium. You have slopes. You also got to maintain truck access. It needs to be fueled. So where it's right now, we put it next to the O2 tank because the O2 tank's got to be filled also. So that truck route that they use for the fuel tank, for the O2 tank, will also serve as a truck to be able to fill the 2 diesel tanks. So there was really no other place to put it. The generator this size requires space. Moving on to Now the parking. When we went through the parking, we tried to figure out, we know parking is sensitive now. We just talked about the required number of parking, where we are. We're right now at 1076 and required is 1296. Now, everybody here is very familiar with the site and knows that that the parking, the staff parks down the street in the deck. So, but that doesn't mean parking's still not free, because it is. So we looked at options, and what we did is we looked at restriping the front lot with 8.5-foot stalls, right? Only 50% of them. The front lot, which I'm referring to in the aerial, is almost all over half valet. So this lot here, we're talking about taking, roughly 50% of those spaces and basically using hairpin striping and allowing it to, we pick up enough room on the long runs to add spaces. So basically what we've done is by doing that and adding those spaces along the row that runs along East Front Street, these two rows here, that's the westerly head-to-head parking and the easterly head-to-head parking. We're restriping them with hairpin at 8.5-foot wide, which hairpin 8.5-foot wide, low turnover, plus being predominantly valet is very appropriate. And what we're able to do is we're able to offset it because the lot, the way it stands now, has about 197 spaces. We're going to add roughly 9 spaces by doing this. So it's going to have 206 spaces. So the net loss in spaces is only 2. So basically, we've minimized to the best of our ability while still being practical and having good circulation, how we can get additional parking. And by the way, not increasing impervious coverage. So it was a really hard thing to try to figure out. So moving on, there was a couple of questions I may have missed when I was going through some of my directs. There was a question about 3 spaces in the engineer's report that is located, again, referring to 810, along where the emergency, there's 3 spaces there, and they want to know if they were for loading. They're not for loading. Loading occurs under the bridge and behind the bridge. There's spaces allocated. I think there's roughly 8 spaces allocated for that. Those 3 spaces that we're going to remove to create the drop off is actually where like emergency vehicles falling in ambulance parks. But there are 3 spaces. If you pull through, again, referring to 810, you can see the highlight. If the ambulance, this is where they come in. There's part of the garage that's 3 spaces that you can actually pull in, and emergency vehicles do pull in there if they have to accompany a ambulance to the ED. So we still have 3 spaces available. There's also a question about traffic flow. Traffic flow is not changing. We're not making the building any bigger. What we're doing is creating a drop-off, no different than really the 2 drop-offs that are there for patients to be able to get dropped off at the emergency department and under cover. And the generator is really not affecting any kind of circulation. It's tucked in the corner. And we're not affecting any driveway entrances except for the loop road going back to Uni, which is very minor. Actually, what we're proposing here, I would consider an enhancement because the way it's laid out now, you only have roughly 12 feet with the parking. You're going to actually have 20, so you're going to have more room in the through lane than you have today. There were some questions about some truck turning, I believe you had. I will provide that to you for getting to the generator. You have to realize when they do fill the generator or the O2 tank, they don't have anybody parked back there because it's all valet. And when they have those deliveries, they just make sure that's empty.
The management advises parking during those delivery times, not the parking application.
Yeah, because all they gotta do is come down Washington Street, and they turn around, they go in here, and they gotta come and they just do it, they do a 180-degree turn, or they pull in and they get next to the unit and they fill it up. they're doing that today for the O2 tank, and they'll be able to do that for the generator.
Did the hospital consider any of the properties they own to the east for the generator location? I think the hospital owns everything to the little store across from Welsh Farms, including the building they just demolished. So were any of those properties to the east considered?
Well, the problem is that the generator's picked there too, because it's proximity to the mechanicals it's gotta tie into. You know, it literally right next to where the generator is going, they can tie into a lot of the service. Now, there's other places they have to run around, but there's still, their proximity to the building is very important, because that generator kicks on and it's gotta be wired in. So it's not like they can, you know, they can put it farther away. It wants to be as close to the building as possible, to be honest with you, because it needs to be serviced. And also, you don't want to have that long of a run between the generator and what it's servicing.
Okay.
Mario, from an engineering and operational perspective, this is a superior location.
Considering the site, the constraints, floodplain, what you covered, for the truck access, yes, this was the result of numerous. I would say it's year looking at trying to figure out what side generator where. There was one last question I did want to get in direct before we move on to some of the variances. There was a question about how this was going to be constructed. I think it was 7.1 in your letter. Well, how it's going to be constructed is, you know, I think we know one way to do this. At least the generator is pretty straightforward. Wall goes up, generator goes in, and it's tucked in. Not too worried about that. So that doesn't really mess with circulation. But the canopy, you know, there had to be a little thought. And in talking to some of the hospital reps, what they're going to more likely do, which makes sense, is they're going to build a bypass lane first, the outer lane. So that 20-foot lane that's going by is going to let traffic continue to go. They're going to take the cars out, get the intersection going, and then they're going to move west to build the drop-off lane, the canopy, because once they're going to have to keep traffic flowing. So I don't see a problem. But I think the simplest way to put it is they'll build the through lane to keep traffic going. And then pedestrians will be handled obviously with interim measures to make sure it's safe going through stuff. So that's, from an engineering perspective, is the majority of my direct.
I have one more question. On the existing the location you're gonna put the generator, what's there now?
Parking, asphalt, you can see, I'm gonna highlight it again, I'll try to get my voice up. 8010, here's the O2 tank, can you see it?
Yeah.
There's asphalt here, and then there's a engineered slope that has ground cover. So we're basically taking half of it on this asphalt, taking the stairs out, and actually that was another question, these stairs will be removed because valet don't use them, they walk around. We're actually putting it half on asphalt, half on that engineered slope, which just has ground cover on it.
So how many spaces are you losing there?
For the generator, we're losing 2 spaces for the generator and then 6 more along Washington Street to offset the impervious that goes into the slope, because I had to balance it.
So basically you're losing the 2 spaces that you're losing ultimately essentially could be accountable to the generator in general.
In general, by the net, yes.
I understand, because that's all you're losing at the end of the day is 2 spaces.
That is correct.
So if you weren't putting the generator, you wouldn't, and just the canopy, you wouldn't be having these problems.
I don't, yes.
Hypothetically, yes. Okay. If you wouldn't, at least that variance would not exist.
Just a quick question, I'm trying to visualize and make sure I'm reading this correctly. Are the slabs for the oxygen tank and the generator approximately at the same level?
A little lower, this oxygen tank's a little lower, slightly lower, so I can get you that. If you look at, I'm looking at C106 of A10, was it? But, you know, if you look at it, the Oxygen tank is roughly 15. And then there's like a little knee wall that goes up like a third, what do you call it, wall? So you're talking this with like within a foot or so of each other. And so the wall itself has to be built here, and that's going to be taller than the generator. So anybody who, you know, any visual from the side is actually just gonna see the O2 tank and the wall behind it.
So Mario, did you study the issue of requested variances and justifications?
Yeah, so the variances, well, at least the parking and the lot coverage are pretty much technical in a sense. What I mean by that is that the parking variance before has been granted. Before, when we came in last time, we were short. We tried our best to make up the difference. And the lot coverage, we did reduce it. We ever so slightly, but we made it a little better today. So, you know, when you're looking at like the easement waiver, I guess, is when we were talking earlier, is that's something we probably, from our opinion, you would be running that easement in the back of the site where the property line maybe is roughly a foot off the building in some places. And less than that, actually. So the parking reduction, I think, is less than the cover of the lot coverage. But in the easement, I like to talk about it. If you look at what the property line goes around the back of the site, and we should just touch on this. If you take 25 feet, you're basically going, the building will be at it in this corner. It'll wrap around, and then the building, you know, over here, that's the top of the building. The bottom of the building is here. If you look at the survey, maybe a little clearer. This is the boundary survey that was submitted with the site, with the site plan. If you look at, I don't know what exhibit this is, so I don't want to reference it.
It's probably, is it part of A1?
Yeah, it's part of it. Okay, so the dark line here is the property line. And this line with the little hatch is the actual edge of the building at the ground.
So just, we sort of were, not the whole board, but I was just talking with with our engineer prior to the hearing. There's property behind your building in that point, which is not owned by Riverview. It's actually owned by Irwin Marine.
The western side.
Yes. So you actually don't,
Northern side.
the northern side, right? So you don't abut the river in that portion of the property.
Right, the bulkhead here is located, if you look at C-106, the property lines is dark line, see it?
Right, and there's land between you and the river.
There's a little bit of land between that, there's a fence, and then there's the bulkhead.
Right, which you do not own.
No.
So you don't abut the river in that portion.
And Irwin owns that.
Right. So you don't own I'm sorry, I should turn this on. So you don't own it. So you don't need to put the ordinance is not applicable in that location. But there's another portion of the property where, the parking lot area where you do abut the river.
Okay, so.
So we should just focus on that one.
Understanding what you said.
Yeah, look at your tax map on sheet C-102 maybe.
Oh, it's right, actually, if you look at this aerial exhibit I just put, you can see the property line right here, that's up against the river.
Right.
What are you talking about?
So that's what we're talking about. The portion where the building is does not apply because you don't own the land between the building and the river. Yeah, go ahead.
So I don't think.
It's with that one. It almost got me.
This, this is owned by Irwin, this part.
That's correct. Okay,
So you don't actually,
about the water. Okay,
okay, but here,
Despite the name of the last one.
this is,
so you're talking about, just for the benefit for people, you're talking about where if you go straight down Washington all the way to the end, the parking lot are up against the bulkhead. Basically, that, I would call it that knob or projection from the building is what you're talking about, is where we flood the water.
correct, I think this is lot 1.01.
Yeah.
Right, we're talking about lot 0.01 is abuts the water, whereas lot,
Well, don't,
this bigger lot abuts Irwin Marina
well,
property.
you gotta remember Washington Street when it was vacated, half went half. So that line goes straight down the middle. You know what I mean? So
Well, regardless, you need the waiver, where the waiver is important is at the parking lot. You don't need the waiver for the other portion that you were referring to because you don't abut the river there. You only abut the river at that parking lot area.
Yeah, we're not keen on granting a waiver. We've never granted a waiver for this variance anywhere in town. We put it in place a very long time ago in case we ever want to build a river walk. Some billionaire feels like it's something they should donate to the town. We're more than willing to accept that money. So we're gonna want an easement anywhere your property abuts the river.
I'd like you to consider that that's all in use for the hospital. And that means that it's also subject to the hospital financing. So the borough would be involved every time there's a refinancing in terms of having to review documents and release and provide.
Well, but that's a decision that's between the borough council, and the hospital. It wouldn't be in between the planning board and you. Because the planning board would not be involved in dealing with financing and anything with the hospital.
In terms of doing the financing, I meant it in terms of the borough would.
We get it.
We understand, but my point is that your comment would not affect this board. As I said earlier, the council can decide that it's going to reject acceptance of the easement. That's a political decision that we don't get to make those political decisions. This board is a non-political board. This board has to follow the ordinance. So those type of arguments aren't really applicable here. At least not in my opinion.
And I hate doing things we've never done.
It's true.
You know,
There's a reason we've never done it.
Why you have to innovate.
We thought of this a long time ago, that we were gonna snatch up easements wherever possible. And we've been doing it for more than 20 years.
This complete the Riverwalk.
No, my God, no. Of course not. Because not every property from here to the west side of town has come to this board in the last 20 years. But everyone that has given us an easement.
Mostly in the water, not on the land.
Okay.
At least I can speak to Spring Point. There, it was in the water, it was not.
John, can you just move the mic near you because we're not picking it up.
The only one that I'm familiar with is Spring Point, and that easement is off the outside of the
Oh, Spring
land.
Point.
It's next to Navasink, it's the senior live.
It's the other day.
Right.
So we would like, the applicant would like to not have that condition. And
We understand.
impose it as part of the condition here. I would like to explain that we would also then seek the council to reconsider that issue.
And listen, that's your right. This board cannot, I understand. And so.
We don't mind giving them work. We really don't mind at all.
And this board certainly cannot bind the council to do anything. So the easements
Like to. But we can't. I'd have done that a long time ago if I could have. But I'm not interested in granting the waiver for the easement at all.
But we're making the application because we think that in this instance, it's de minimis in terms of any impact. The likelihood of that not being utilized in the area of parking for this hospital is very remote. And that the hospital will be back many times, and if the situation changes, maybe that's a better time to approach this issue. Particularly if you have areas where they're not complete. If this was the last step needed, I think that would make it a much more critical or significant issue. But how does that work with the obligations and insurance and so forth for the parking spaces? Are we allowed to continue to use them? Does the easement eliminate them?
So as long until the easement would have to read something along the lines until such time as the borough decides to exercise the easement, you're allowed to use it for parking. I mean, it would have to be that way.
Can I just clarify, since I know I'm gonna get asked this question. You're saying abuts the water.
Right
This is land. So it's starting here, this to this. Well, I'm not really even there, but yeah, basically that. Okay, want to make sure it's so I can be sure.
And when you come back for the 2 or 3 properties you own to the east, we're gonna want an easement there too.
If I may,
Be ready for it because it's everywhere.
I believe the
Not everywhere.
zoning board, when they were considering the variance for the parking on the building they demolished, rejected the request for a waiver on the easement.
That's correct.
So there's already an easement there.
Good. Well, if you come back here for it, we won't reject it. We want it.
Still requesting the waiver. I am.
You can request.
Telling me is that you're not.
I'm not keen on it at all.
And was it a waiver or variance?
It was a waiver.
So it's an interesting, the ordinance is in the variance. My understanding is the ordinance is in the variance section. However, the ordinance says very clearly, unless otherwise waived by the municipal agency. So that's what the ordinance says, and they use the word waive. They don't use the word variance. So it's one of those weird situations. It's probably in the wrong section or they use the wrong language, but we have to go by the fact that it says waive.
Going to consider it as a waiver.
I don't know what else to do. Did they, does anybody know the zoning board considered it a variance?
Or consider it as variance. I'd have to go.
I can't put up.
Well, let's find out because that's actually instructive. If the zoning board treated it as a variance, then we should follow the zoning board's lead on that. So Mr. Junko, the question which has arisen is this ordinance about the easement is in the variance, is in the bulk section. So normally that would be a variance, but the language of the ordinance uses the word waive. So what we're trying to look right now is what did the zoning board do when you considered this? You were counsel for the hospital in that application?
No.
You were not. Okay, so we're looking it up. We just want to see how the zoning board treated it, if they treated it as a variance or they treated it as a waiver, and we want to be bound by whatever the zoning board did. So we stay consistent. So we're looking it up right now. You're gonna
But keep in mind, we don't like it either way. Call it whatever you
Yeah, we
want.
can call it whatever you want, right?
It still doesn't matter.
But it's important to get it right in the resolution that we do call it what it is. And obviously the standards that they would have to meet to get the variance are higher than it would be if it's a waiver. So. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, do you want to take like a 2-minute break or something to,
You'll take a 4-minute break. Don't mess around here, 4 minutes.
let's just take a 4-minute break while we look it up so we can come back.
Let's give them-
What's that?
Better not.
It's the land use code?
I've been to-
It's defined, so
Show up.
I'll talk to you when we get off. I don't need it because it's in the ordinance. It's in the ordinance too. There's a definition for it in the ordinance, which is different than what the land use act says. Sort of.
Let me word them.
Better ones. This is at him and his ex-wife.
Concern of waiving.
So
You can see it.
Urban Marine owns it all the way down.
Yeah.
So that's the language.
Right.
That's it.
Is there any other reference to it in there? Yeah, it's up right there.
Okay.
Justify a waiver. They treated it as a waiver.
Okay.
Okay. No, they did not waive it, but they treated it as a waiver
Oh.
rather than a variance. Jackie?
Yeah. No. Between the property line.
It says specifically in the, we'll say it back on the record when we get on the record, but the zoning board resolution specifically says it's a waiver.
Yeah.
All right, so Mr. Chairman, I'll just note for the record, we took our break. Everyone who was here before is back, so there's no need to redo the roll call. And Mr. Junko, two things. We checked the zoning board's resolution where they dealt with this issue. They specifically treated it as a waiver, so it will remain a waiver for this board. And then secondly, the term, since we were talking about this earlier, the term municipal agency is specifically defined within the Red Bank zoning ordinance, and it's similar to what's in the Municipal Land Use Act, but I just want to read it. It says the planning board or board of adjustment or governing body of the borough when acting pursuant to NJSA 40:55D and this chapter, which basically means, I think that takes out the governing body being a place where you can go get the waiver, because it would only be if the governing body is acting pursuant to NJSA 40:55D, which I don't know when the council would be acting in that capacity. I guess if there was an appeal of the use variance, I don't know. But I don't know when else they would, but it would not, if they're not acting pursuant to the land use code, then they're not a body you can go to get a waiver. That is my opinion, and that's how I read that. So
The hospital needs to wrap their mind around the fact that
you're gonna get the waiver,
they want this.
but yeah, that you're not gonna get the waiver, right? Right.
So I just want to clarify one thing, because somebody asked me and I think it was a misunderstanding. Just so we know, just to confirm, along here, not along the water's edge, no easement.
Right, because you don't own the property.
So this here is the easement. When you come to this point, if you take 25 feet, I just want to make clear, when you said there's no building in it, there would be the corner of that building. So just want to make sure that we just point that out. Because it's not, there's a very good chance that when you come down here, you can take this photo, no matter when you take it, that water could be,
So essentially, the way, if there's literally a building within the 25 feet, you're gonna have to map it out to confirm whether there is or isn't. But assuming there is, obviously, I think it would be fair, and I'll say this to the board, that the easement would be very clear that it's not giving the municipality the right to
We're not gonna chop.
tear down a
Yeah, we're not
building.
gonna Chop your building up.
Right, but if the building's ever demolished, the easement would go into effect, so
So who do we negotiate this easement with? The board?
you would submit, you don't negotiate it with council, you would negotiate with us, the form of the easement, and then it would be submitted to the council for acceptance. I mean, that's the way it's normally done, but you wouldn't negotiate it with the council.
It needs council action.
I would think the council has to accept it.
Yeah, I would, yeah, sure. I mean, if we did this someday, it would be a big deal. It would be incredibly expensive. And we would probably have to talk to several homeowners along the way about where their bulkhead is or where their building sticks out. But it doesn't mean that we want to wait till then to get the variance. You're here, the easement. Thank you. You're here, and that's why we do it when you're here, because you want something else from us. That's the truth.
Buying our approval by granting the easement.
Listen, those are your words. Those are your words.
I wouldn't phrase it that way, and the reason I wouldn't phrase it that way is because, well, I understand that, but the ordinance is very, very clear that you have to give the easement, so the game plan walking in, it's not something this board is making up.
Also says there's a waiver right.
It says you have a right of a waiver if you can show us why you should get the waiver, and the board accepts it. But the board doesn't have to accept that, something I had.
Already been decided.
Well, we're not begrudging you. Yeah, Mr. Junko, you certainly have your right to make your argument as to why the waiver should be granted, if you wish.
What's next, guys?
Just simply because significant impacts to the property, which becomes an issue when and if that portion of the property has to be redeveloped. So I can't really make argument about an easement that I don't have the terms and conditions of. And I think that perhaps that is something that the board intends to adopt, to require the easement, that we have the opportunity to at least see and review and negotiate, if you will, the terms of the easement, so that we know that the hospital activities and financial issues will not be impacted.
So you would be drafting the easement, not us. And you would be drafting it and it'd be submitted to the board. And I think it's pretty simple I don't think it's that complicated how the easement would read. You have to follow the ordinance.
That's a good question for me. So if the building is in, it's in the easement, you can't build, we all acknowledge you can't build this.
We all acknowledge that someone's not gonna walk in through a building and we're not gonna make you have to take down the building.
So what, we have to come back to this planning board if the building is coming down or it's a change? Like, what do we have to come back? I mean, right now you're talking.
But the building is not the entire property there. You're saying it's not like the building extends out to the water. I mean, we can see it. It's a parking lot.
No, I understand, but what I'm saying is that, you know, you're saying you're here now, and I'm an engineer, so sometimes I'm 2 + 2 is 4. I'm sorry, but if we have to come back as the applicant, if they're gonna even demo the building's gonna be demoed, redeveloped, anything we do to this, it's not like you have a vacant piece of
Let me
land.
go further, clarify the building you're speaking.
Okay.
Yeah, we're really talking about this parking lot, aren't we?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
There's a corner of the building that's gonna be in there.
Plan is gonna work around it.
I can't tell from here that corner of that building is not it, because you go 20.
Right, you're gonna have to measure it.
Yeah, how wide is that drive aisle between that building and the bulkhead? 12, 15 feet? Listen, we'll give you a parking variance for 6 more spaces. Cut that whole thing off, let it fall into the river and give us our easement. And we won't bother with your building.
Of course, that creates a further parking easement.
We'll give you variance for those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces. We'll give you variance for that. Chop that whole thing that's sticking up into the river right off of there, and then we don't have any problem. And we won't chainsaw your building to put the walk in. I promise we won't cut a little notch out of the corner of that building.
Borough will assume the obligation to get the approval from the Department of Health.
From what I can tell, the front of the bulkhead is about 24 feet from the corner of the building. So the building I'm scaling on a 20 scale, so it's pretty good. It's just from the corner of the building to the front of the bulkhead. And I don't know if that's the water line. It's close. It's very close, because the water line here, by measure to the water line, is about 25 feet from the corner of the building. That's the water line at the time of survey.
And again, we're making this way too complicated, people. This isn't that complicated. It's an easement of 25 feet from the water. If there's a building in the way, we're obviously not making you tear down the building. If the building comes down at some point, that portion of the easement would have then applied. No one's gonna build a walkway through your building. So it's a 25-foot easement. That's the end of the story. That is what the ordinance requires. That's what the board is suggesting to you that they want.
Mark, I recognize you speak for everybody here today. It's a point in the future where maybe that won't happen.
And you're right, but I only can deal with this board,
And that's why we're doing it now.
right?
In case there's a bunch of idiots here in 10 years, when you come back.
That's what you're saying.
What?
You're saying it's a condition of approval.
It's an
It
ordinance.
is. Yeah, I mean, it
It's
already
not a
is.
condition of approval. It is an ordinance that says you have to do this unless you're able to prove that you're entitled to a waiver. That's what the ordinance says. We're not making it up. It's not an extraction from you. It isn't. It's an ordinance provision. We didn't make it. We didn't write the ordinance.
I'm not arguing whether it's.
Okay.
Yeah, we probably did write the ordinance now that I think about it, but
But the council had to introduce it and adopt it.
it's not a surprise to you. You knew about it. You wrote about it. You knew it was coming. We're just telling you, we like it and we collect it everywhere humanly possible at every first opportunity.
Of course, you could buy it, but that would.
Yeah, no, that's no fun. What else do you have to talk about besides the easement?
Well,
I know you have another witness.
let me ask you this. Harry, did you, your testimony in support of the variances?
I believe I've given the technical reasons why the variance is required.
And let me ask you, do you feel it upsets the zoning ordinance or the zoning plan?
No.
Feel that it advances
Just want to hear what you say.
continue to function and have it.
What canopy was?
About that.
So, yes. I have no other questions.
Mr. Junko, what is Mr. Tracy going to testify about?
If the board wants to hear testimony of the architect.
Unlikely.
Canopy. So that's up to the board. Is the board, we already saw pictures of it.
Clear as it's shown on the plans, and it is structurally sound. All building code requirements.
Right. So this is a sign of respect for Mr. Tracy that we don't need to hear from him. He's not upset.
You get paid for coming either way, Mr. Tracy, but thank you. I always like to see the professionals get paid.
I just wanted to make sure that if the board had questions about that, was the only issue that I thought of, other than very clear and simple.
100% it's appropriate for him to have been here, but I don't think the board needs to hear from him. So.
Does anyone from the board have any questions for the applicant regarding their testimony so far? Does anyone from the public have any questions regarding the application? Make a motion to close the public portion of the meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. I would like to make a motion to approve the application as heard, with the variances in the engineering letter and obviously,
You're denying the waiver request.
if I must, yes, I'm
You must.
denying the waiver request. Because I love this thing that we came up with many years ago. And obviously subject to any other restrictions or requirements from the engineer.
Second.
Oh, sorry. Christina Bonatakis,
Yes.
Emma Crusoe,
Yes.
Barbara Boyd,
Yes.
Wilson Bibi,
Yes.
Crystal Hernandez,
Yes.
Brian Farkas.
Thank you very much.
In a minute.
We have the regular meeting minutes from June 25th. Is there a motion regarding the minutes? Second? Anyone? I was.
I wasn't here either.
Nobody was here.
Christina And.
Barbara.
Yes. And Barbara Boyd,
Yes.
that's it.
That's it.
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, can we discuss one thing before we go? Because I think we want to discuss the 23rd meeting, right?
Oh, yes. So on the upcoming meeting, the 23rd, it will be on the agenda, repealing the station overlay district. Council will be doing first reading tomorrow. And so for, consistency with the master plan, we have to review the repealing of that district. Because we approved the redevelopment area for that section, there's no need for the overlay. So it was recommended to council to repeal the overlay to make way for the redevelopment plan. And so with that said, the 23rd meeting is a regular meeting. However, because it will be a very short meeting with the resolution from tonight and the consistency review, I am asking that the board do a virtual meeting that night and starting at 6. Does that work for everybody?
Everybody okay with that? My cat's ecstatic about it.
So we'll notice for a 6 p.m. meeting that evening.
Yeah. So you don't have to come here.
Can I get
We'll be done by 8:15.
Yeah.
7:15, no, 6:15. We'll be done by 6:15.
Can we get a motion to
So moved.
second?
All in favor of going home?
One, good job.
I don't have my